from the All Indiana Podcast Network. It's Diversity Focus Today. Now, here's your host, Rickie Solid Gold Clark.
And welcome to another edition of Diversity Focus Today. I'm your host, Rickie Clark, along with our team, Dr. T. I call her Dr. T, and I guess everybody else knows calling her Dr. T. Tammy Harris.
Oh.
And we got attorney Mike Murray, who's doing his thing. And our guest for our part two in our program is attorney Nathaniel Lee. Welcome, Nate, to the Diversity Focus Today program. We're super glad to have you as our guest today. And I was asked to make sure I mention some of the activities, the things that your law firm does. So I've got your number, area code 317-631-5151. But tell us a little bit first before we get back into our discussion about your law firm and you.
Well, thanks for asking. My law firm, I've been practicing law for 43 years here in Indianapolis, and our law firm engaged in a civil trial practice. We do wrongful death, major accident cases, trip and falls, and general negligent action result in injuries to consumers or people. We don't engage generally in corporate representation, except we do subrogation work where we sue companies or individuals who cause damages. Like, for example, if you one of the things we used to do a lot, if you went to a car lot and did a test drive and you went out and wrecked a car, the insurance company paid the dealership, and then we would represent them to sue the person who caused the damage. So we do plaintiff type work exclusively. And also we do Social Security, which is an important factor. Social Security has been one of the cornerstone of Americans' retirement since the 30s. Once they developed that, it's a wonderful program that, a lot of people in our country rely on Social Security as their primary source of retirement. And the other thing about Social Security that's important that people need to know is that people become disabled and unable to complete the journey until they're 65 or 70. And so it provides disability benefits. So that program, though, is under a lot of pressure now. So hopefully everybody rally and make sure we keep this great program in place.
Well, let me ask you, because I know of various folks that have Social Security, those that are also trying to get Social Security. Why does it take so long for those to get Social Security that are having a difficult time? You hear that a lot. Man, I'm trying to get it, but they won't let me have it. I've been trying to get it for 6 months or for a year or 2 years or 3 years. Why does it take so long?
That's an excellent question. In the past, it's the manner in which you apply for Social Security. If you apply for Social Security and in your application, you submit the evidence, but the evidence that must be submitted to get the benefits back before they start disrupting it this year is that, like, for example, if you had multiple back surgeries, for example, and you said that I can't work because I have a bad back. Well, your medical records that you submit must document the criteria for disability. So a lot of times, the reason that people weren't awarded benefits right away is that the evidence they submitted, there's a very strict guidelines of evidence that must be submitted. And most of the time, physicians don't put in the patient chart the information that must match up with Social Security. And I don't have the list of impairment in front of me, for example, but there's specific things that must be contained. Like, for example, if you were trying to get disability benefit and your record document that you had chronic pain. Chronic pain is a disabling condition, for example,
Right.
and that would qualify for benefits. Or, for example, say you had cancer and your record document that you had stage 3 cancer. Well, that would immediately qualify you for benefit. But the problem, though, is that when you submit your application for benefit, you could do it over the internet or you could set up an appointment to do it in person. I would encourage most people to collect the evidence that they need and submit it through the internet because it, quite frankly, probably be done quicker than if you went in person. The reason being is that you may not be able to get an appointment to meet somebody in person for 2 or 3 months, particularly now. And finally, the Social Security Administration did not necessarily have all the staffing needed for the amount of claims that are being filed. And to make matters worse, this year, the federal government had a rapid decline in workers based on what DOGE has done to the federal government.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. All right. Mike, you got another question, I know.
Yeah, so you're talking about the rapid decline in staffing. That's the Doge cuts and the across the board cuts that the administration made.
Well, yeah, see, the cuts, like for example, this year I qualified for retirement and you supposed to get your check a certain day of the month. Well, this year it's been inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're having some difficulty because, like many people, I read in horror what occurred. They just went in, started terminating people, not knowing who in the heck they were terminating.
Right.
Like, for
what
example,
those people were doing.
yeah, they terminated the nuclear people of the country. They terminated the people that control the nuclear bombs. I mean, of all the dumb thing. I mean, you're talking about ultimate stupidity. So the one thing that you don't want to terminate people that control nuclear bombs, and they did that and they had to hire everybody back. That's just a glaring example. But the agencies across the board, they just routinely terminated people. I had family members working for the federal government. I had a sister who used to be in charge of the acquisition for ICE near the Pentagon, and they would routinely terminate people not knowing exactly what the people that they're terminating was doing and why it was important to keep that person on staff. And so I suspect that some of these terminations resulted in an adverse impact on services that you get for benefits such as with the Social Security Administration. I'm not sure if you call the Social Security Administration now that you'll get anybody answering the phone. I'm not sure. I know we had difficult, for example, with the IRS in our practice. We routinely request records from the Internal Revenue Service. And this year, we've not been able to get back responses because when people, for example, have litigation, part of the claims is economic losses. And you could generally show economic losses. When you're an expert, you need tax returns. Well, we haven't got a single one this year, since the new administration took office. And I'm not sure what can be done at this point in time because people that control the federal government are doing some things that are probably inconsistent with the processes that we're seeking.
There's nobody there to answer the phones anymore. I mean, this whole thing came from this idea of making government more efficient and not spending so much money. But the idea of government, it's there to serve people, to provide for Americans' needs. And when you cut that budget and just, indiscriminately cut across the board without thinking about what these people are doing, this is what you end up with, a lack of service. And you're still paying your taxes, you're just getting no service for it.
Yeah.
Then I guess on the other side of that, the Job Corps here, they closing all the Job Corps.
Job Corps, yeah. That's
facilities for these young people who's trying to find a leg in or a second chance, and that's like, why? What are they going to be prepared for, and how to make a difference for themselves and their families if they don't have that opportunity as well?
Well, in this program, we constantly preach the fact that in order to get anything corrected or changed, you got to vote, you got to participate, you got to be aware of what's going on, and then act. And I mean, get it directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak, if you can. I know during our previous show, we talked about somebody, Mike, you mentioned one of your neighbors don't even want to watch the news. Well,
Right.
you need to watch the news. You need to read because you may get second, third, and fourth hand information. But by the time you get it, look how many times it's been twisted and added to and subtracted. Yeah, I mean,
Can.
So that, we've got to be, a lot of this is our fault. We let this happen. So it's going to be a lot harder now to correct it. Hopefully we can get it somewhat corrected in 2 years when they had the midterm terms. And then of course, what is the president? He's got like 3.5 years to go. Oh my God, it seems like forever. Counting it down to be able to get rid of him. And the governor too in Indiana, that's for sure. So anyway, Nate, what's your comments? What's your thoughts on all this?
Well, first, let's talk about our national economy. We saw with the last administration, for the first time in American history, that we had 48 months of substantial job growth in America. And what surprised me most was one of the bills that were passed that probably escaped most people was the Inflation Reduction Act. That act resulted in prescription medication costs being dramatically reduced. I remember one time I went to the CVS pharmacy, and I hate to name somebody on the show, but there was a lady who was in front of me, and she was trying to fill her medication, and it was extraordinary cost. I mean, it's cost a lot of money, and so I was standing in line, and she didn't have enough money because she was on fixed income, and she needed that medication, and so she was trying to negotiate with the pharmacist to get. She had enough money to pay 10%. That would have given her 3 pills.
Wow.
So while we're there in line, I'm observing the conversation. I go on the internet, and the medication she was getting had coupons, and she could get the same medication that was going to cost her about $900 for $25.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So I pulled it up, and I said, ma'am, use this coupon, and you can get all your medication for $25. We handed it to the pharmacy, and she got the medication for $25, and she just hugged me, said, you just saved my life. And she was so happy that she can get her medication for $25. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act had the same type of effect. It dramatically reduced the cost of prescription drugs. Maybe most people don't realize that through your Medicare and things like that. And so these type programs also are under attack. I was trying to read the proposed budget that was passed, and the budget didn't make a lot of sense to me because it looked like there was the summary, of course, there's a reduction in proceeds for things such as Medicaid and Medicare. Now, what the argument is that there's massive fraud, right? And the argument that they're making is nonsensical to me. The reason being, if there were fraud, there would be prosecutions, right?
Right. Exactly.
And so it's a make-believe type event that's been created because if nobody's being prosecuted, that tells me that you didn't find any. But they're using that for justification to pass a bill that what I looked at was probably not in the best interest of most Americans. If they actually take the time and read the excerpts of the bill, it's got a lot of provision that was just terrible. I was just skimming through parts of it. I said, this is terrible, but it goes back to what you said earlier. That is that you can't complain in a democracy when you don't participate. So there's only 3 things you can do as a citizen. 1, you could get registered and vote.
Yeah.
2, you could show up for jury duty when you're subpoenaed, which is an important function. 3, you can serve the country by joining the military. So as a citizen, those are the 3 pillars that we need people to participate in to protect our democracy.
Yeah. And or also participate by writing and your congressman and your senator, even though and some you might not think, well, they don't respond. A lot of them do in fact read it, or they have their staff read it. Yeah, my grandparents used to always say the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if you're not squeaking, you ain't getting no oil. So you've got to participate in one way or another in order to get things to change.
Ask him to let viewers know, listeners know, where did you go to read the bill? Because I think it's about educating yourself and knowing that information. You said you accessed the budget. Was it a particular website or so that you went on to?
Well, anything that's happened in America, just go to Google and just type it in, it populates. So you don't need to know a website, just use natural language. And so all the things that we're talking about, you just type it in and just populate. And then also, I might add, the advent of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Some of, Chat GPT, Claude AI, they're remarkable. Now, they're not sacrosanct in the sense that we use artificial intelligence. Sometimes they make some big errors,
Right.
but for the most part, I found it to be mostly reliable, but not 100%. So you don't need to know, Americans, about websites anymore. Just type it in. It'll populate on your computer. All these cases that came down, for example, whether Supreme Court cases or Abreu Garcia or whatever, you just type it in and they actually set forth the court opinion. You can read the court opinion on all these cases. For example, tell you how neat it is. I have some cases pending involving police action shooting. And so there was a case that came out, the Martin case out of Houston, Texas. And I saw it going before the Supreme Court. And all I did was to type in Houston shooting case. And there it is, the published opinion. Just populate. Doesn't cost you a penny. I could be at home, relaxing, pull up all these cases now that used to not be populating on the internet. Now they're readily available, the entire opinions.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that. That's good information to know.
Too, like the difference between .com and advertising, because advertising is usually typically one-sided. They're promoting something for their own cause. So
Right.
organizations, you might want to look at those web searches that's in an org, or gov, so you can or even your senators, look at the prefix on that to make sure you go into the source too.
Reading the correct information rather than the advertising.
Right. Or the prompts or the clickbaits.
Yes.
That's what AI
Clickbait, right.
does. It authenticates all the data to bring up what you want to hear.
Right.
Whatever you search in your search engine is actually catered to you. See, I told you before I was studying AI, right?
Yeah. You were studying that.
Not being able to walk through the door.
Yeah. So that's
mindful that you're going to only kind of get what you want to hear based on your own search entries as well. So you got to broaden out and look at the sources.
Yeah. Well, you keep studying that AI and all that other good stuff.
How to ride a horse, but I know how to drive a car. You see how
how that works. Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Nate, on the previous show, you mentioned about Atlanta, Georgia, and of course that's close to my heart because I'm back and forth to the ATL, and I go there a lot, and I get refreshed every time I'm down there because they seem to be, don't seem to be, they are always so far in advance to what is going on in Indiana. And we know, and now you get to the point, if you tell them, you're from Indiana, oh my God, man, how do y'all stand that up there? All those things do you guys get to talk? Do they let you walk across the street? What's going on? Yeah, of course. Now they get to talk about the Pacers, of course. Go Pacers. And of course the Colts and so on, what have you. But you mentioned that. So what's your opinion compared to, and I know what it probably will be, compared to Indianapolis compared to Atlanta, Georgia, and the surrounding areas?
Well, the gross national product of Atlanta, according to Google, is $701 billion, right? Mm-hmm. So that Atlanta metro area is one of the highest gross domestic product in the country, right? And that's because, they got the world's busiest airport. They have a lot of traffic and a lot of things. But in terms of quality of life, be quite frank with you, I think Indianapolis is a hidden jewel. It's the city itself is a great place to live. People here are friendly. People get along very well. I remember a good example. Last Friday, I had a flat tire. I had two strangers came and helped me until my tire was ready to go. People I didn't know. If you go to most cities, I don't know whether or not I get the same type of neighborly love in most cities that we get here. I went to law school in Athens. I'm familiar with the Atlanta area. I like the Atlanta area, but I like Indianapolis more because the people here have more of a sense of family. Now, we've run into some problem recently. We have too much gun violence with our teenagers. I don't like that, and they're trying to address that issue. But the most part in our city, people get along very well. And we ran into some issues. For example, a few years ago, we had a record number of homicide involving black males as a result of police action shooting. I think a lot of them was unnecessary, but they've kind of remedied that, and there's less of that. And then finally, this year, I got statistics, I think early this week, I think this year we've had, 51 homicides, so it's down from last year.
Right, yes.
And so now, on the plus side, we're in the NBA Finals.
That's it.
As I would say, it's the game today.
And so the whole world's going to be watching Indianapolis in our wonderful city in our downtown area for at least the next week or two. And so we're going to have people worldwide. See, what most people don't realize, when you go to these foreign countries, like where you go on vacation, they have the American sports on the TV.
Yes, they do.
So what they're doing in the United States is being broadcast worldwide. And so I think it's a great thing for Indianapolis to be involved in this process. I think it's wonderful, you know.
Good. Okay. I'll just throw that out there since you mentioned the ATL, and I'm back and forth from down there. Okay, getting back to some of the things that we had questions on and getting your opinion on. Let's take a look at since we're based in Indianapolis, the local scene. You know, our mayor is having a difficult time uh, that he pretty much placed himself in the middle of, whereby he should not have. But you know, we'll have to see. This is his third or fourth term. And he said not too long ago that he said he was not going to run, and then he changed his mind and said he is going to run. Team, do we have any opinion on that sort of thing? And of course, here recently, even though this program will be airing, you know, a week or two after after everything, there was quite a disturbance in the city county council meeting a few days ago that normally does not happen when one of the young ladies that had accused the mayor of Indianapolis's staff member of some type of sexual involvement or
Sexual harassment.
sexual harassment. Thank you there, Mike. And she was trying to speak, or they gave her like a minute and a half to speak, and she went over that, and she wanted to continue. And rather than allowing her to continue, the city county council president, Bob Osley, basically asked the deputies there to step in and remove her from the podium, which has caused quite a ruckus and really has stirred up the hornet's nest again. So, team, and they join in on this one too. You're part of the team today. So, what's your opinion of that? What do you
Well,
think?
what generally happens is that sexual harassment, sexual assault is bad, and women's rights should be protected. And there are legal remedies. You know, I have lots of friends that work for the city, but I sue the city all the time. So if they, I love the mayor. He's a personal friend of mine. But if he's wrong, you know, you sue him. And so we settle cases all the time for people that do bad things, and we go on to the next matter. So
Yeah.
I suspect that the women who are the victim of this, if they are victims, they could exercise a right, file suit, and let a jury determine whether or not they have valid claims. I can't express any opinion, of course, on whether or not they're meritorious or not, but because
Right. Yeah.
ultimately every case, you know, you go through the evidence and you put the case on and see who wins. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose.
Right.
Absolutely. That's
Well, and in this case, it wasn't even an issue about the merits of the case. It was more an issue about, being able to control agendas and schedules. And the lady had an opportunity to present her piece of it. And Baba Osley wanted to move on after her assigned time, and she wanted to continue talking. So the argument is, do you let her continue talking, or do you let the county council move on to the rest of its agenda? But as Nate said, sexual harassment is bad and it needs to be dealt with. People need to be held accountable. But how you do that, and giving people time to air their grievances versus letting the organization address other parts of its issue, of its business. It's a tough mix. That was not a nice scene. It has raised tensions for probably reasons that didn't need to be there, but
okay.
is what it is.
Dr. T?
Yeah, I think it's a time and place for every. Oh, looking at you now. There's a time and place for everything. And I didn't see it personally, so I don't know really how it occurred or what led up to it. And again, that goes back to the knowing, educating yourself, instead of hearing residuals of everybody, own opinions of the stuff, but let it do its due process. Of course, if she has a concern and it's definitely about violation of her body and all, definitely just go through the process. But like I said, I didn't see the actual hearing to know if it was according to her time run out or was it on topic.
I think it's the time
Yeah.
ran out. Yeah.
It was
Okay, we're down to less than 2 minutes. Nate, we're going to come back to you. We got 2 minutes to go. So therefore, do your thing. Talk about whatever you want to talk about, the firm and anything else, things that you may have upcoming. We have 1 minute, they tell me. So
Time goes
1 minute to go.
I think that what's important that people need to know that if you think your legal rights have been violated, you have recourse. And Indianapolis have some of the most educated jurors on the planet. And so, for example, if these women think they've been mistreated, they have recourse. On the cases, police action shooting, I looked at about 10 cases. I'm doing 2 of them. And important you to know, I plan on trying those cases because I think that there was bad shooting and they're going to be held accountable.
Okay. Less than 30 seconds, team. Okay.
So I just want to make sure you know that you can ask questions or give topics on our Facebook page at Diversity Focus Today.
Okay.
And then we are on YouTube with Diversity Focus Today with Rickie Clark.
All right, Mike, we time to go, I think, here. Alan, we done? We're counting down. Nate, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Nate.
Thank you, Lee.
Good talking to you.
All
Nice
righty.
meeting you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening and watching Diversity Focus Today with your host, Rickie Clark. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.